This is Philip.
This is Derek.
Welcome to Same
Same
But
but
Different. Today we are in my office again,
Yes.
and I am in office where again.
So what are we going to be talking about, Philip?
Naturally, we're going to talk about work and career. A potentially boring subject,
Ooh.
serious even, but
Yes.
I think this is good for us to cover.
That's true, Philip, because ultimately, you really think about it, it does take up 1/3 of your day, and it's more than 8 hours. So inevitably, you will have to think about work and job. Of course, things are a little bit different now. I am currently unemployed doing my own freelance stuff, whereas Philip, you're doing your own thing. So,
Yes.
so I wouldn't say it's necessarily 1/3, but yeah, it just point to a reality of how we need to think about work.
Yeah, I mean, we this is also a topic that is very reflective of how we are very different in our
Yes.
career path. Yet there are some small similarities,
Correct.
as opposed to the earlier topics where we have a lot more similarities.
That's correct. Yeah.
And the differences are not as divergent or as evident.
That's correct, Philip. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of that comes from a couple of key points we're going to cover later on. I mean, our own background, our own upbringing, how we approach work in that sense, and how we tie that to potentially our own self-identity. So all that will be covered. I know heavy topics, not as fun, but stay with us. We'll promise you that this is going to be fun.
Yeah, eventually, once you've gone through this episode, we also hope that we can have a very open discussion or getting some comments from our viewers and listeners on what you think about work and career.
That's correct,
reflecting
Philip.
upon your own work and career.
That's correct.
And this is also particularly interesting to me because I'm now going through a course to be a career counselor.
Yep.
So that's why it's good for all of us to reflect in our entire career trajectory or path what work and career means for us.
That's right, Philip. So with that in mind, let's start right from the beginning.
Yes.
Growing up as kids, right? I think it's fair to say that both of us don't really know what work means, or rather the significance of work. Or let me be even more specific. I think we have been growing up in a family. We were growing up in a family with relatives where the idea of professional corporate workers don't exist in our circle. Yeah,
correct. Ambition is not a thing.
Yes.
In our family, not so much that what we mean by ambition is so-called chasing the career path, climbing the corporate ladder.
Correct.
Simply because we do not have any corporate climbers in our family.
That's correct.
Right.
So our parents were hawkers, our aunts were hawkers, our grandmothers sell kueh kueh.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very grassroots, it's very local, it's food businesses. So of course we can argue that we could look at that as entrepreneurship, but ultimately, yeah, we didn't grow up in an environment where corporate ladders, dealing with poisonous working culture and things like that. It's not a thing.
It's not a thing.
Yeah.
Possibly because also we were one of the oldest grandchildren.
Correct.
So it wasn't something where we have cousins who are older than us that we can look at them and say, oh, they were doctors, lawyers, engineers,
Correct.
that we can be envious of, that our parents can compare us to. It didn't happen.
That's correct. And keep in mind, we grew up in the 80s, the 70s and 80s when Singapore was going through an economic boom. So various professional positions such as engineers, city planners, healthcare providers, lawyers, bankers, all contributed to the economic success of Singapore back in the 70s and 80s. So if we were in that kind of environment, we would have the right people to look up to and say, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a banker. But no, we don't have bankers. We're not in a family of bankers. We were not that.
So contrasting that with what when we were younger, what we want to be when we grow up is a great, very common composition topic.
That's correct.
And what's different right now is that composition topic is still existent in the education system right now, but they add a layer on top of it, and that is the career counseling part of it.
Correct.
So it is something that is very common in schools these days, and it would have been great if we had it back then.
Yeah, I would even argue, Kidstopia, right? There are also play acting opportunities for kids to become firemen, fire people,
police
people,
to be in the police force, to be in the healthcare industry.
Right, they can play act and they'll kind of wear little costumes. That's so cute. Yeah. But again, we didn't have that opportunity growing up. We simply thought, okay, we were left alone pretty much, right? Like the study first, think about what you want to be later on.
So with that absence of a role model of direction, you kind of have to emulate. Maybe not for us, but some of our other peers, where they emulate their parents. If they are professional white collars, they will say that, oh, my mom was an accountant, for example.
My parents were teachers.
Yeah, so I will probably go in that direction.
Yeah.
So with the absence of that, you can say that we were kind of lost when it came to the point of us completing our tertiary education. That where do we want to go?
Right. So that wasn't helpful if you really think about it. I mean, sure, we did well in math, and sure, you have some idea of interests. So I know we were both interested in languages. At one point, we want to be songwriters. Right.
Still true.
Still true, right? So we only had that crazy idea, quote unquote, crazy idea of pursuing what you are interested in, right? But ultimately, it's kind of a throw all that shit on the wall and see what sticks kind of approach, really.
Yes. So with that, when we come to the point where we are throwing ourselves into the workforce, right? So this is also the point where it was totally different from us.
Correct.
For me, I went into the workforce after army.
Correct.
And different from Derek, I went to the army a little bit later.
That's right.
So I went to the workforce only at the age of about 27.
That's correct, Philip. For viewers and listeners who did catch up on our education episode, you are aware that our education paths between myself and Philip took a very divergent approach. So whereas I did the conventional JC, national service, then uni, then work, yours was
Philip
poly.
Was poly, and then army, and then work. Of course, during the army days, I also did a overseas distance learning to get my degree in computer studies. Although having completed that degree, it was totally no use because that was the time when there was the first .com bubble.
Correct. And you never really thought about being a computer scientist.
I didn't really mind that because we are being brought up with the conventional idea that whatever you study is going to be the credential that gets your first job, which is so different these days. And even for myself, I was purely out of necessity and circumstantial forces that I cannot go into the computing world, and instead had to take up a role which is totally different from my study before.
Exactly. So same here. I mean, I took up arts at the university level only because I know I didn't want to do math anymore. So that does cut out a lot of things like engineer, doctor, whatever, right? But yeah, even after graduation, I think the conventional thinking back then was, what good is an arts graduate in Singapore, right?
That's for you to defend and to explain.
So it just became one of those where, okay lah, fine, you find the first job that you can find, and I actually joined a shipping company
to be
some office worker of sorts.
No,
to be a traineeship broker lah. Unfortunately, the company closed down after 2 months. So I very quickly learned about the idea of being laid off, being a statistic in the national unemployment figures, and I believe that would have been the Asian financial crisis, I think.
Oh, because of that.
I think so lah. I don't want to think that I was the one that caused the company to close down lah. But I think it's coincidental that it happened during the Asian financial crisis. So very quickly you learn about the value of work, being unemployed, and of course it was my first job, so I didn't think too much about it lah. But
2 months into the job,
I know 2 months. I didn't even finish my probation lah.
And they have to like, sorry.
Yes, you got to go.
Company is closing, you got to go.
Yeah. Wait, let me take that back. I don't think the company was closing, but I had to go. But whatever. But yeah, I was unemployed. In short, I was unemployed. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That must have been quite harsh.
I don't know. I was young, first job, no responsibilities. So okay lah, maybe that's the universe's way of telling me fuck off from there. Shipping you, fuck off. Right? I mean,
so you experienced all of that.
Yeah.
It was almost like a forced growing up of sorts because of being asked to leave even before your probation is done.
Exactly. You didn't think that your first job contributes to you being a national statistic 2 months into
so soon.
All right, 2 months into it. But almost that then does help to sharpen a little bit more about what you really should be doing lah. After that, then I began my 20-year career in research law.
Okay.
Which again, I didn't choose because what good is sociology and research, right? But it's something you find out along the way. Yeah.
The softer skills that you learn in education, in tertiary education, actually prepare you.
Right. So things like critical thinking, analytical thinking, research skill sets. When you write your thesis and stuff, it all applies. Even if it's from an academic standpoint, it still works within the corporate commercial standpoint.
Yeah. And contrasting that to what I've done in my first job. So Philip was really weird in the sense that I went into an industry which was totally different.
Exactly.
The exhibition events industry. It was the first job that gave me an interview and allowed me to take up the job lah.
Yeah, and you were lowly paid doing something that
yeah. As though a lot of fresh grads are lowly paid. Wow.
But you were in an industry that deliberately lowly paid you.
Oh.
You were a glorified contractor, Philip.
An operations executive.
A glorified contractor.
But during those times, you don't really think about the angle of that being lowly paid. You're just earning your dues. Your experience, right? Because your first job.
Right.
So I'm being thrown into the deep end where I have to learn things that I don't know.
Yeah.
Like how to calculate the size of a booth, how to calculate materials, do a booth setup. And what was more interesting was that I was also allowed to go overseas for projects. Yeah. So I found it exciting.
As any fresh graduate into the workforce would like. Yes, because work travel was exotic. Was exotic. And yeah, it was a bit of a draw, when you look at job descriptions. Ooh, we can get to travel.
Yeah, for young single people like us, of course, it's attractive.
Yes, for sure.
So my first job actually took me all the way to when I was 30. And I was given an opportunity to work overseas.
Correct.
And that's the second divergent point where you are in Singapore and I chose to kickstart my overseas career in Vietnam.
That's correct, Philip. And that's something I never quite understand. Because fine, I mean I was doing okay, I was doing well in Singapore, and yes, I do have some overseas projects, but I was able to base my career out of Singapore.
Yeah.
In the exhibitions, MICE industry, if you will, what's your excuse for having to do it overseas?
Well, there was 2 points lah. So despite all of my ex-colleagues fine, they did say that the package I was getting, I think I was being a bit too open with them to let them know how much I was. They said, oh, you're too lowly paid, blah, blah, blah. And there was also the second point where I think I was young and brash. This one is a throwback to when I was in JC, where I decided to leave JC and to go to poly. So I do see a common pattern where I don't clearly think out what are the pros and cons. Even if I do, the heart wants what it wants, right? So I moved.
Selena Gomez.
Yes. So I moved forward with the idea of going overseas, despite everybody saying no, except for our parents lah.
Yeah,
they were none the wiser anyway.
Correct. And again, going back to parents having some kind of when used to influence on us, they have viewpoints, but I think ultimately we know better how to grow our own careers and our work. right? So
although having said all that,
yes,
I still think that it is a opportunity that everybody should take to go overseas.
Working overseas.
Everybody.
Why?
Everybody.
Why is that attractive, Philip?
Look, Singaporeans have a certain kind of branding.
Yeah.
That we are well educated, we have integrity.
We are good with operational stuff.
Operational
we follow
stuff.
Instructions really well.
Yeah, and we are very clean in a sense, right?
Yeah.
So me being based in Vietnam, it actually helps that I have all of those skills, and then working in my ex-company, it really helped. And throughout the entire 12 to 13 years when I'm based overseas, all of this branding of a Singaporean actually helped me in securing different jobs one after another. And it's being based overseas gives you a different perspective of how you work with people, how people perceive you, how you can change people's perception about you
in a different culture, right?
Yeah, communication skills. And because you're in a foreign land, there's also some level of how you react to situations.
That's correct.
Yeah. So all of these skills, yes, you might be able to pick them here in Singapore, but once you're overseas, you're being forced to pick up all of that.
Right.
Very
The need then becomes very clear, and your capability or incapability to operate in those areas becomes amplified.
It becomes very obvious very quickly.
Right.
Yeah. So I also noticed and also saw in the media that our Singapore government recently has also been trying to push out a few policies.
That's correct.
To help young Singaporeans go overseas as well.
Correct. Yeah. I think if I'm not wrong, Philip, I think you're talking about the one where there might be a program to subsidize companies to send some of their Singaporean workers to overseas for business expansion reasons, or even to just work in the overseas branch of our office, because typically that becomes an issue for some companies having to bear the cost of sending a Singapore worker, doesn't have to be Singaporean, but Singapore worker working in a Singapore office, to go to another office for operational purposes. Yeah. So this kind of reduces the risk, at least at the cost level, for any corporation who wants to expose their workforce, and also for the workforce themselves who are looking for an opportunity outside of Singapore.
Yes. And what's also very good about this policy is that they also take care of the family as well. For example, you have kids who are studying right now, so you could have almost like a freeze of sorts. I mean, if you have to be back, for example, the contract is just 1 year and you have to come back, your kid's position in the school will still be reserved.
Yeah, right.
Also, all of this it's almost like you no longer have an excuse not to go overseas.
Exactly. So I guess that then maybe does point to the idea that, yes, Philip, you're right. Having overseas exposure is important because the Singapore brand can be taken overseas. And wasn't there a time in the late 90s and early 2000s when being Singaporean in a market like, for example, China, was and is still an advantage?
Yes, bilingualism aside, because it's not a given for Singaporeans.
Yeah, Jesus.
Bilingualism aside, a lot of our, like what we talked about, the branding is there. It helped, and it really pushes the purpose ahead for us Singaporeans, for our Chinese nationals, actually to think about Chinese Singaporean has a certain advantage over other nationals.
Okay, that's true. But okay, you know what? We are now kind of going into the topic of where we started our careers, and I guess we probably have to address the elephant in the room, right? Do we like work? Do you like work?
Again, something that we are also quite different in is Derek is not a work person.
You know that story, the ant and the locust.
Ant and the grasshopper.
Oh, sorry. Locust, grasshopper, whatever. Yeah, the ant and the grasshopper. Ant, grasshopper. Ant, Grasshopper.
Philip is the ant and Derek is the grasshopper.
Yes.
Yes, Derek will while the summer away. While,
Yes.
Well, Philip is doing all the ant things.
And things.
Okay.
And things.
In short, okay, it's not okay. It's not as though I'm like, oh, labor is glorious. I'm not that. I'm not communist, by the way.
And Philip doesn't. Do you like work?
I believe and trust that you do need to put in the work for things to happen. There is no shortcut to success.
Okay.
Yeah.
Such an unsexy belief.
Yes, correct. It's very unsexy. But having said that, it's not like I'm a workaholic. I used to be. Actually, I used to be.
I know, and yeah, this is one point I don't understand. It's like, why do you have to work so hard?
Circumstantial, because my previous jobs, really, really like wring me dry.
Yes.
So it's circumstantial situation where it shapes my character as well, and also it also goes back to the point of how we're being brought up when you're kids. You're supposed to work hard, follow the straight and narrow path to achieve success.
Okay.
So that stuck with me. That teaching, along with the circumstantial bring up of being forced to put in all the hard yards.
Correct. That means your job, just from a starting point, isn't easy. It's not. Yes. I mean, of course, we all know that there are no easy jobs in the world. There aren't. Really, there aren't any easy jobs. That out of the way, there are some jobs which are harder than others. And harder from a setup perspective, harder from a intricacy perspective, harder from different perspectives. So what you're saying, Philip, is that your job didn't allow you to not work hard. And then you embraced it and it became something that you believed in. Yeah,
it became a backbone of my belief when it comes to work.
Ew.
Yeah, backbone, belief, unsexy word.
Ew. What?
And maybe for you, Derek, is it because you have always gotten away by being an intelligent person in your work? Because you are able to blah, blah, blah your way through.
Well, Philip, again, our work is hard.
Okay, no shade. I'm just saying that
I know.
Look, you in your previous line of work, it's providing perspectives, analysis, and all of that. Of course, it's hard work. Yes. No denying, no shade there.
Correct. Yeah.
It's just that there is a certain level of attachment to that versus mine.
Yes, Philip. I guess the way to really think about it is when it comes to the output, ultimately, of what we deliver to your client and to my client, right?
Yeah, correct.
Hard work from our perspective is a process.
Yes.
It's a process of which then we apply smarts to find the answer ultimately. That means my favorite phrase is we don't boil the ocean. Because that would be too much work to find what is really important in a piece of work.
What is the boiling point of the ocean?
but that's exactly it. You cannot boil the ocean, and you should not boil the ocean. Because if all you're looking for is a pearl, just look for oyster lah. Why do you need to boil the ocean to find a pearl?
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
To force the oyster to open up.
Right. So I think, yes, our hard work is present, but the quality of the output doesn't necessarily come from hard work. So I kind of am able to get away, your words, not mine, with get away from hard work, get away without doing hard work. In the traditional sense, because I don't have to, whereas in your case, your output is determined by hard work. Yeah,
the difference I believe between us is that in my previous line of work, the output, because you mentioned about output just now, with what I've done before, the output is not just a proposal. It is a proposal which needs to win the hearts of all the stakeholders, and that translates into physical events and physical exhibition booths.
Yeah.
And on some levels, there are also KPIs being tied to that.
Yeah, yeah. Right.
So that there's so many layers of uncertainty, and to make sure that you cover all of those uncertainties, you have to put in an extra level of work to make sure that all the KPIs are being met.
Right. That's hard.
That is hard.
Right. The process and the output is hard.
Yeah. So it is definitive of how we see work already.
Yeah.
We're coming from different planes, actually.
Right. Yeah. So maybe I'm not a grasshopper per se lah. You know, it's just like I play throughout summer trying to find the inspiration. You know, whereas you toil because that's what you have to do.
Yeah. You know, ants are like social animals.
Yeah. Right.
So